everybody, John here again. This time we're meeting outside in this humidity. Bear with me. So in last week's video, I talked about some tools I had around the house that I kept close by for a lot of varieties of projects, both woodworking and not. And I'd mentioned that I was going to do a top 10 recommended tools to kind of get into woodworking or something like that. I'm not going to go into as much as, these are the top 10 best tools, as much as I recommend these 10 tools. I have five hand tools and 5 power tools I'm going to talk about. Now, some are in sets and groups because you can purchase them that way. But anyway, so the top 10 recommended kind of tools. To start out, I'm going to talk about number 1, tape measure. I think most of you know what this is. I hope most of you know what this is. This is a 12-foot Stanley metal tape measure. I picked this up for I think about $10 or $15. It might be on the closer to the $10 scale at a home improvement store. There are. I'm going to show you a couple different types of these. There are different styles, different dimensions. That make up to 25 foot. I find in fine woodworking, I don't really go bigger than 12 foot, though sometimes 16 foot can be needed if you're trying to, have kind of a versatility of measuring a room. It can definitely help out. So we have the same 12-foot Stanley here. This is a plastic version. It's a lot lighter weight, and it's about the same size. I like the weight of the metal one. It just feels durable. I've had this one for quite a while. So this style is, a pull out and it retracts instantly, and then you can push down to lock it in place. They also, I've seen more recently, is this style where you can pull out and it actually stays. You can push a button and it comes back. I have found that this style, over time, when you pull it out, slowly, I don't know if you can see that, retracts itself, especially when you pull it upwards. You can see that going in. Now that's wear and tear, and I'm sure that's also has to do with a cheaper type of tape measure, but I prefer the standard Stanley. There's plenty of other good brands out there, but this one I can just, I can rely on and get it for a fairly decent price. Okay, moving forward to number 2, a square or a rule. So a square is, again, something that is perpendicular or 90 degrees. You can use it to check the square of a board. And then a rule is actually the metal ruler. Most people think of it as a ruler, so a steel rule is what a lot of people call this piece right here. Now this adjustable combination square, which is fairly common, I think a lot of us have trouble getting this piece back in place, is extremely versatile. Again, I mentioned last week, it can measure 90 degrees, 45 degrees, as well as it has a level. Though mine looks to be struggling a little bit. So this is, a very, very versatile tool. Now with that, a couple other styles of squares here. We have a speed square. This is aluminum. This is typically used in, I would say, framing or, construction when you're quickly marking things, really quickly. It does have a bunch of different indications on here for angles. It has dimensions on here. I personally do not use this unless I'm doing, let's say, rough work, but marking on dimensional lumber or stuff like that. Now also, this is a fixed square here. These are handy. This one is a shop square that we have, and personally I don't use these just because being a community shop, these drop all the time and they can knock out a square. So it's, if you can get your hands on one and only you use it, then you're sure it's square, then I recommend. But any type of square for checking 90 is something I would start with. You can pick this Swanson square up for, let's see, about $10, I believe, at a home improvement store. But also, if you can get yourself a steel rule. So I recommend, you can get plastic ones, but I recommend something that you can get small dimensions on. This is a 6-inch Woodcraft steel rule. This is on the more expensive side, about $20 or so, but I like it because I can get a really, 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 small dimension. It goes down to 30 seconds. So if I'm, in fine woodworking, you might find that important. I like having one of these on hand. But also something like this, which is, an older style rule, or, let's say tape measure, but it's, older style measure. I don't really use this, but I know a lot of people who use this religiously, or use these. Now it does have a depth gauge on it too, which is kind of cool. And they're handy, they're reliable. This thing's probably older than I am, but still around. So that was number 2. So again, number 2 was square slash rule, because in this you can get a square and a rule. I just want to talk about a few different ones. So number 3, again from last week, is a screwdriver. Now this is again in a, say, adjustable, but changeable. It has a Phillips and flathead, both number 2 and number 1. Extremely handy because it's a 4-in-1 screwdriver. So instead of going out and getting a bunch of different ones, you can get away with just using one. Now this is about $6 or $7, so it's definitely well worth the price. So with that, we're going to move on to number 4. So number 4 is chisels. So anytime you're doing joinery or glue up or anything like that, and you need to get rid of some waste material or some glue, some dried glue, you would maybe want to approach it with a chisel. This is on the higher end of chisels. This is about $170 so pack of Stanley Chisels. You can get a 4-pack of decent chisels from Lowe's for about $30 or so. They're really useful in a wide variety of applications. I would recommend looking up a YouTube video or so on how to sharpen chisels, and with that planes. Now we will be offering a workshop in the fall about that, how to maintain your chisel blades with a wide variety of different both machines and stones and stuff like that. But it's almost just as important of buying a chisel to know how to sharpen it. You got to maintain that sharp edge. So again, this is an expensive set, but you can also buy a cheap set. Chisels are just really handy tools. So number 5 is a handsaw, another another product from last week. This is a pole saw. It has a fine tooth setting and a coarse, or a rough or coarse tooth setting. This is really handy for a lot of different reasons, both clearing material out, fine cutting. You could probably cut dovetails on this with the fine tooth. But a couple other different styles. I mean, your more standard or well-known saw here. This is, you can do a lot of different things with this, but I typically use it for cutting trees in the yard again, for both of these. But it's helpful. You can probably use a cross-cut block and cut 2x4s with this. It's handy to have, and it's a more famous-looking saw. This is a hacksaw. This has changeable blades on here, so you can you can have different tooth settings on it, or different tooth TPI or whatever blades. This is set for metal, but you can get ones, I believe, for wood. I know PVC pipe and a bunch of different materials, and lengths and stuff like that. So it's just handy to have. But this just kind of goes back with having a handsaw, preferably for wood, but you can get ones that are interchangeable for wood and plastic and other materials. So sorry, this Irwin handsaw runs you about $20. Forgot to mention that. So let's see, that was number 5. So moving into the power tools at number 6, you saw this from last week, is a drill and driver. I bundled this together because you can get this as a set. It's actually quite common. You can get a 20-volt drill driver set from a home improvement store for, I think, about $140. It comes with batteries, it comes with a charger. Now, I bought these 2 at different times. This I bought a while ago, this I bought recently. I am sure you can still get hard cases with a lot of things. I prefer hard cases. They're a little easier to store and they're a little bit more rugged. Though, you can do just as well with the soft case. I guess it's a little bit more versatile in terms of you can put other products in here. But my impact driver I use this to drive screws, and I use my drill to drill holes, though you can do both with a drill. So if you find yourself on a money crunch or whatever, you can be just as successful with a drill, or pretty close to just as successful. But I like, being able to drill a hole, then immediately follow up, or pre-drill a hole and immediately follow it up with a screw without having to change a bit or whatnot. So it's just really handy to have. And with drivers, you can have a series of attachments or bits, as they call them, that you can put into it for different screws and whatnot. So, so this is number 6 at drill and driver. All right, number 7, jigsaw. So, getting into more cutting or power tools for cutting, you have not seen this. This is a jigsaw. It has a saw bit right here, saw blade for that matter. This is a really, really useful tool. You can cut curves with this. You can cut interior curves. You can cut exterior curves. It's all, I say versatile, and it is. And I say interior and exterior because you can drill a hole. You can drop the saw blade in there and actually cut the inside of a hole out. So if you wanted to make cornhole boards and you had no machine to drill a large hole or whatnot, you could just draw a circle, drill a hole in it, and use this to cut it out. Now, I have found that with jigsaws, they're a little bit more rougher of a cut, especially with the pull-up action. But you can get different, saw blades, finer tooth, and especially with the materials you're cutting. Maybe be careful with plywoods and stuff, or I say be careful, but make sure you have the right saw blade when cutting certain materials, because you might have more or less tear out. This is on the cheaper side, this jigsaw, but I've found that you can get jigsaws about from $60 to $100. You can get a decent jigsaw. The one we have at the shop, I believe, is a Bosch, and it has all sorts of features, tilt. I mean, I would recommend that, but this one has variable speed as well, and has fast and smooth cut. So even on the cheaper side, you do have a variable, or a variety of bits and stuff. So you can use this, to make, you put a fence down, and you can have it as a bump up against this metal plate down here and make a rip cut, or you can make a cross cut. And what I've actually seen a lot of people with both the jigsaw and the circular saw is actually bump this up against the material and use this as a makeshift fence for cross cutting. So that's kind of cool. So again, jigsaw is super handy to have. You can do a lot with this, a lot with just this tool. So let's see, that was number 7. Number 8, another cutter. So this is a circular saw. This one is ancient, it's a relic, I still use it, it was my father's. It is a Sears Craftsman. So if that doesn't say anything at all, then I don't know what will. So yeah, this guy is an older model. The older style Craftsman, I found that they were really reliable, they were built really well. Bear with us, we got a train coming by. But this guy again has this metal plate at the bottom which you can reference for making rip cuts, cross cuts. It has an angle setting right here, so you can cut miters and pieces. You can do a lot with just this. In fact, when I was in high school, I didn't have a table saw, so what I did was I actually attached this to a piece of plywood, turned it on, pulled the blade up, and made a table saw, making my own fence with it as well. I don't recommend doing that, but it just shows the versatility of this machine. So you can do cross cuts, rip cuts, and it works just as good. So circular saws, you can find a decent corded circular saw for $100, about $100 or so. Some are a little lower, some are a little bit more expensive, but for that price range. So let's see, number 9, Dremel. So another tool I recommend for woodworking projects getting started is a Dremel because its versatility. Now, those of you who do not know what a Dremel is, it is basically a corded, powerful corded drill in a way. This is basically a motor up here with basically a chuck that holds a bit. So we can think of it as maybe a mixture between a drill and a router. And you can use it to sand materials, to cut materials, to grind materials, to sharpen saw blades to sharpen drill bits. I used this when I started woodworking to do a lot of really intricate sanding. I was doing a lot of not necessarily hand carvings, but with the jigsaws, making a bunch of cool shapes and whatnot, and I could sand those really hard to reach interior and exterior curves with this. Nowadays, Dremel makes all different types of products, but just having a versatile tool like this for the job is handy to have. Now, I think with Dremel, you can get a pretty decent one from a hardware store or a home improvement store for about $100 or so, and it'll come with a wide variety of attachments. So that was number 9, and then on number 10, going back to last week, a sander. Now this is a random orbital sander. This is a single speed. You can get the same exact model in a variable speed, but this single speed was about $70 and it fit my price range. So I highly recommend having some sort of power sander for your projects, because after you complete something, you want to sand it, get out all the glue stains or glue marks, or any of the marks you make from any machine or hand tool. You can get it out with a sander, and then it gets it right to the right amount of quality to stain it or to finish it. So I highly recommend it. So again, these are just some tools that I recommend, and showing you some differences in some of the hand tools. You can get by with really any of these, and you can definitely build some pretty cool projects. This is how I started, and I think this is how a lot of people can start.